what I'm going to work on is with Kempo, we have a set of non-lethal techniques, okay? And what I mean by that is when James Mtmas introduced this and wrote his books, in the books he identified as part of his Kempo art, there was what he called the war arts of punching, striking, and blocking, okay? Then there were the joint locking and joint striking arts, the pushing and pulling arts, and then the total evasion tactics, okay? My evolution with that was I knew one of the guys that had, it's incorrect to say he trained with Mtmas when Mtmas was in prison. They had a lot of talks and they worked on the concepts and stuff. And so Ray Aquila of the Tracy system had basically worked that into a program, but I was never able to get to him, so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make it up. So I did, and then I went out to see Ray Aquila, and he's like, yeah, that's right. So, cool, we're going to go with that. What I did, though, is, and since Vargas is not here, he was talking about reinventing the wheel. My idea, I've talked to people that have done this before, and what they did is they took these principles of pushing and pulling and joint striking and all that, and they either studied other arts to bring it back in, or they just made up new techniques. My idea, being that I really had no guide, was what if I take every technique I know, and if I've got a technique that's got, say, 3 or 4 strikes in it, if I make every one of those strikes a joint strike, okay? Or if instead of striking, I push, or instead of grabbing, I pull, or whatever that's going to be. And so I worked in that way, and I think I've come up with something that's pretty easy, that's pretty systematic, and Ted Sumner, one of our guys that's on our Senior Executive Council, says that with these concepts, because there are 3 more concepts we'll introduce, you can take every technique you know and basically triple your knowledge of your system just by applying them different ways, okay? Now, caveat, some of it's useless, okay? There are techniques that, you know, someone grabs your wrist, you turn around and do a rear thrust kick. That's difficult to do as a joint strike or a push. You know, you don't put your leg on someone and then push them away, and so there are some things that you'll learn going through the process, like, yeah, I'm discarding that, but that's part of the learning process, okay? So, before we get into techniques, I want to give you guys a couple of definitions that we're going to play with. These are sort of my definitions that are used to bring us all into the same concept. There's overlap, okay? And we'll get to that a little bit. But first of all, if we're going to talk about a self-defense technique, and we're going to call it a war art, okay? The definition that we use is it incapacitates your opponent in the first 2 movements, okay? So you got a technique, everybody knows Chinese sword. Step in, inward block, chop to the throat. Second movement, we've basically knocked the person out or incapacitated them, okay? We've got a technique that you step off and you break someone's arm in the first movement, okay? That's going to be a war art. Now, real quick, just to, again, kind of spread out the definitions, we've also got to look at the way people count, okay? We all did aiming the spear yesterday, okay? So half fist to the throat, we can all agree that if the guy's head's leaned back and you punch him, the full range shot to the throat, he's probably incapacitated if he's alive at all. The question is that the first, second, or third movement? So it depends on how you count. I do the technique with all of the opening and then here, okay? So is that my second movement, or is it 1, 2, 3, and this is the 4th movement? So there'll be some of that. We might call something 2, and you might call it 4. We'll just deal with it, okay? So a war art will incapacitate your opponent within the first 2 movements. Most of our standard Kempo self-defense techniques follow that theory, okay? A joint locking or a joint striking art is going to be something that deals mostly with striking to the joints, okay, or striking to, or locking up a joint, okay? Now, what is the difference between a joint strike and a joint lock? Just being real simple with just
control.
Control, okay, okay. Not quite what I'm looking for. What else, though? Yeah. Come up here for a second, since you volunteered. Thank you. We're not going to move that hard. You don't need to discard things. I was going to grab that anyway. So just turn. Let's go kind of at an angle. Just hold out a right punch. Okay? Now, a joint lock, if I'm applying pressure against this arm, I've basically got it locked. Okay, now there are all kinds of ways we can do lock. But the difference is if I strike it, okay, I'm going to impact the joint. If I'm going to lock it, I'm going to press the joint. Okay? So the real difference, just as simplistic as we can get between a joint strike and a joint lock, is the speed of impact. Now, if I'm talking about, you know, doing things like what we talked about yesterday, getting up like this, these are different types of locks than what we're going to be doing here in just a second, okay? Because this is hard to see, well, how would I make this one a strike, right? But for the most part, if you're hitting someone on the knee, okay, so like put your right leg forward, okay, I can side kick the knee and make that a strike, or I can put my leg in his knee and push him to the floor, and that's really more of a lock or a push, okay? So we'll go with that kind of as the working theory. The other question is, what is the difference between a strike and a push? Speed of impact, okay, and timing of impact, okay, or timing of power. If I'm going to strike Ramin on the chest, what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate force, and then I'm going to make impact, right? If I'm going to push him, I'm going to make impact, then generate force. So we're just switching the timing on that, okay? Now, joint locks are pushes and pulls. If I'm going to lock this arm at the elbow, I'm going to pull this towards me and push that away from me and effectively lock that for that moment, okay? So we'll play with that a little bit as well, okay? A pull, that's pretty obvious. I mean, when you're bringing something towards you, you can look at different blocks. If you're throwing like a right punch, I can step in, and if I'll take that block and then just kind of continue the motion and move out of the way and kind of pull him around me, we'll talk about that more or less as a pull, okay? We're not going to see as many of those. We're going to stick mostly with the pushes and pulls and stuff like that, okay? Now, some of our Kempo techniques are not actually war art. Some of them deal more with this concept ahead of time, where you might be doing a joint lock or a joint strike that does not incapacitate your opponent at first, and it takes a couple more movements to get there, okay? And so we just define those in the category of whatever their primary sequencing is, okay? And then the last part of that is the overlap. Most of the techniques are not purely one or the other, okay? But for the purposes of what we're going to do for understanding the way to apply the principles, we're going to make them all purely one or the other, okay? So any questions before we get started in some actual techniques? Okay, so then, if I'm true to my theory, if it's true that we can apply these concepts anywhere, then what I like to do with these is instead of telling you all techniques and then we work with it, somebody give me a self-defense technique that has, say, 3 or 4 strikes in it.
5 swords.
5 swords. Okay, does everybody know 5 swords? Raise your hand if you do not know 5 swords. Okay, I don't agree with that. Now, when you guys, real quick, when you guys do 5 swords, is it all with the right hand, or does it have the left hand in it as well?
Both.
Okay. The reason I ask is because in American Kempo, they do what we in Tracy's call 7 swords. Okay? So their 5 swords is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? In Tracy's, 5 swords is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Now, American Kempo, when I argue with them, they say, well, yeah, but 2 of those strikes aren't actually hand swords. Well, okay. 7 open hand strikes.
The flat of the blade.
Yeah, exactly. So there's again, we can disagree on some little things. So when we say 5 swords, do you guys know with the left hand primarily?
Yes.
Okay, so let's work with that. So just kind of everybody set up and do that technique a couple times. Let me make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So just go ahead and do it a couple times. In the air, you're fine.
Yeah.
So everybody's pretty much on the same page with it. Okay.
Make sure the green belt's got it. One-handed?
No, go ahead and do it. Oh, 7 swords.
7. I don't know 7 swords either. That's why I said I didn't know 5 swords, because there's 2 different versions of 5 swords. One-handed, you need a sword.
2-handed version of the 7 sword. Yeah. Okay, so now, here's the question, okay? Let's take that from a war art. Okay, so if Ramin's here, just hold out your right punch for me, okay? What I'm doing is I'm stepping in, I'm striking here, boom, okay? That should pretty much incapacitate. We've got all this other stuff that we're going to do in the technique, okay, that may or may not be necessary, okay? We can talk about what all that's for later on. But the bottom line is this is considered a war art technique, okay? So moving into the first concept, if I'm going to make this a joint striking technique, okay, so just hold out your right punch again. First thing I'm going to do is when I step in and do my block, I'm going to target either the inside of the elbow or the inside of the wrist because those are both joints. Now, obviously, if I'm going to target the elbow, I'm going to want to have a left hand up anyway because that's going to cave in on me, okay? But, and y'all answer this for me, once I have done this inward block, okay, my next strike here is to the side of the neck, okay? So what joint can I hit?
Get it to C-spine.
Okay? What else? What's the easiest one to get from right here? Jaw, right? So, boom, jaw strike with a fist or whatever, okay? I come down through here. My next strike is an eye strike in the technique, all right? So what am I going to hit that's a joint with the eye strike? Okay, go to the chin and stack the vertebrae. So I'm not really striking the joint, but we can make a case that I'm affecting a joint with the strike by making that a palm heel that strikes here, okay? Coming back in with a spearhead to the solar plexus or an uppercut or whatever. What do I have there that's a joint? I can penetrate so hard to hit him on the spine, right? Okay, now hit, okay? I'm coming down. I can hit low on the hip and affect that a little bit, okay? And then from there, I'm going to step off, okay? We've already talked about this, but I can strike the jaw again. I can strike the jaw here coming down. I could, if I needed to, strike just against the shoulder. And then again, going back up against the neck, the spine, or whatever's available there on the jaw, okay? So you can see how that works, right? So pair up. What I want you guys to do is play with it slowly. The goal here is not to, do the technique to make it look good. The goal here is to go, where's a joint I can hit? Okay, so play with that for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to something else.
Because it also has the nerves,
Right.
for the nerve strikes.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point he's bringing up. One of the things I also wanted to mention, when we're striking joints, okay, if you do nerve striking, okay, the nerves in your body, they run underneath your skin and underneath your muscles, but they surface at your joints. They do that because when you do this, your arm doesn't fall asleep, right? So if you're wanting to get into some nerve striking as well, striking the joints helps you find those nerves. The nerve activations are about a quarter in size. So I have people that say, well, if I'm hitting along in here, how am I going to actually hit the radial nerve? It's this big and it's on the inside of the arm. How are you going to miss it when you go into speed? If I try to hit it, I'm going to miss. Okay, try to miss it. Hit the guy's arm and try to miss that nerve. And so, play with that for a few minutes, then we'll move on to some other aspects of that same concept. And ask questions if you have any. Throw me up. Okay, so let's work with this. That's it. I don't like that. So he's going to punch you in the face. 2. Left punch. 3. 4. Okay. Do that same sequence. That's fine. You want to
Ooh. You didn't miss that one.
good.
There you go.
So if I'm just doing the here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Very different from those.
Yeah, no, you don't take them off. Don't put them inside you might as well give them to me.
No way is
We're doing 7 for us.
If you're doing 7.
Yeah.
We had a guy in a full.
1, 2.
Boom. I'm sitting there to my hip, that buckles me here. What do you think about that? Because I'm here, now bring this leg over here. We're doing 7. So your adjustment, and that would come
Because
across.
I'm trying to do that part where I'm being nice and
Instead of the eye flick, that's a jaw stroke. So when you step, instead of, because we're coming in.
Yeah, it's coming this way.
Yeah, right there.
You didn't throw it. That comes in. 1, 2, 3, 4.
There you go.
That's a joint strike.
You're in. Take your hammer fist right there. I think for what he's wanting us to do is to think about a technique you already have, and then just change that technique. Every strike is change the targets, but keep the same one. Because then the intention changes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the, because or I can get the draw, does it comes here, across the other side. So let me ask you this. So I like that strike. I like this right there. I like that a lot. Come in. That's a joint. Does that count? That's what he said.
Here's why, because just in my way of doing this, my way of doing this haven't really changed anything about what you're doing. And there's no leg strike.
Just the target.
Just to take it from the arc to the joint. But what you're seeing is part of the process, which is this work. And there's something hard to it. But there's no joint to hit. But you learn something.
I am height too. Because when I was coming in and did that, his joint, it's right there.
Yeah, exactly. That's what right kind of slides down.
Thanks, Mike. I was nice since like I'm not times. And so then when I came over, he's like,
Okay.
slung the crap out of me.
Let's move on a little bit. Does everybody have a little bit of understanding of that? Okay. I mean, you're not, and like I was saying a minute ago, you're not going to get to where this is like video ready today. And you're going through, going, would I really hit that joint, or would I do better with this one? For me, that's a good question. He said that in the middle of this, on that hip strike, a good place there is you can step up and kind of pop the guy's knee with your leg. And his question was, does that count? And I said, no, not in my scenario. Not that it's not useful, but in my scenario, we're not changing anything at all about the basic movement of the technique, and there is no leg strike in this technique. Okay? So that's a different technique, but he thought of it in the middle of it. So something was learned, a question was asked in his mind, he answers it, and so we're going to move on with that. And so again, we're not really getting these ready to use on the street today. We're just learning how to apply the concepts, because you guys all know a certain number of techniques. Okay, and you can now take that basic principle and go back to everything else that you know and go, okay, what if I do crossing talon and only hit joints? What if I do Japanese sword and only hit joints, or whatever that's going to work out to be? Okay, so let's move from there then into joint locks. Okay, so get with your partner again and let's go through that same sequence of movements, but now we've got to look at things like how would I lock a joint with this? Okay, so and one of the guys I used to work with years ago, Jim Hanna, who was a police officer up in the Pittsburgh area, he made a comment that stuck with me. I thought was really cool. He talked about what he calls a soft joint lock and a hard joint lock. Okay, a soft lock is when you hit the joint, or you lock the joint in a way that it makes it bend the way that it's supposed to bend. Right? A hard lock is when you make it bend the way it's not supposed to go. So this is soft. This is hard. Okay? It's not about the amount of force I put into it. Okay? If I want to do a takedown, okay, this is a soft takedown. This is a hard takedown, because if I do that right, I'm probably going to crack something or hyperextend the knee or tear some ligament. I may not have to break his leg, but it's going to do some damage that the other one's not going to do. Okay? So, 5 swords, for example, if you're throwing your right punch, I'm on this side of the arm. Okay? So my initial joint lock might be to catch here, cave the arm in. Okay? I've got to figure out a way to lock this. Okay? Do I take that movement and wrap into something like a neck crank? Okay? Great. Except now I can't do the rest of the technique. But That's okay. It doesn't matter if we get to number 3 and we've got to stop, okay? Then change it up and then try to get to number 4. So work with that for a second, play with it, and again, on a technique like a 5 swords or 7 swords where we're locking, we're probably not going to get 7 joint locks out of this, okay? What you should do is maybe, if you get that lock on the arm, get the lock on the neck, okay, now go back and do strikes on the first 2, find out if there's a lock somewhere here, okay? Then do all these as strikes, find out if there's a lock here, okay? So work on that for a few minutes, and then we'll move on as well.
Yeah, but like you said, you're taking the concept of the soft
Hard, soft,
yeah, when we do, what is that, this technique.
that's right.
So that's that soft joint line, right?
Other than that,
Yeah.
But I'm trying to find it.
so what we did before, here, 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 right? My question is, that's a net.
Can I play with it?
Here, but then that ends.
I guess if you came, I would probably try to get try to get him. Pull down. That's this right. That way I can get
Come like this way. Come like this way. Grab.
what I'm thinking is,
That's a depends on like this.
Well, that's what I said. We make it.
now we got to match 3.
One here. Lock. And if I can come in here, do skeletal freezing. Collapse here, and then boom. Send it this way. Now, to come back in 3, 1, 2, freeze, I'd have almost.
That way. Do it on the other side, yeah.
So what I did, 1, 2, because this hand's got to go forward for the free strike. So my hands have to transition. So as this transitions, come back forward this way. This turn here and get it back. Then I can almost come, or I can come in and do a bulldog block there. This way. Well, I'm just trying to kind of flow out. That's what I'm wanting. If I come in and turn right, but then if I come back, I can turn this way. 4, 5, yeah. Then always pick up this arm for a neck lock that way. There's 6. Okay. Then I need to come back for 7. That's a flow drill. Holy crap. Yeah. All right. So trap my wrist. Well, that would be, just freeze with your leg. So 1 is collapsing here. All right. Now pull my wrist with your leg. And that stretches me. There's 2. That's your second stretch.
So you said 1.
Skeletal freeze me. Push this away. Boom. 2. Now, switch hands, check this across your body, and check right here.
Okay, let's go back in.
That's my job. Here.
So inherent problems, and I'll talk to you guys about the bulldog. Once you apply a joint lock and you've got it locked up, you're kind of done with the technique, right? I mean, you might release the guys, you might need to change some other stuff. But if you've got the lock applied correctly, you're done. So it's difficult to take a technique like 70 swords and apply 7 joint locks. Okay? You kind of apply one, and then skip that one and apply the next one or whatever. So, again, that's just the concept. That's the way that we do this. You go back and you put that in all of your techniques. We're going to change techniques now, okay? The one I want to use, and we kind of used a little bit yesterday, we started yesterday with aiming the spear, and we did it against the cross-hand wrist grab, okay? Which ends up looking also a whole lot like our crossing talon, slightly different application. But if you guys are familiar with the Tracy's curriculum, and we take the technique crossing talon on the cross-hand wrist grab, we've got that on the cross-hand wrist grab, we've got against a right punch and an overhead club attack all in the same belt. And so it's a really good technique to kind of break some of this stuff out. What I want to use for the next part, because we're going to talk more about the pushing and the pulling, okay, is we're going to take the, instead of the crossing talon wrist grab, we're going to take a technique called arm hook. Does everybody know that by name? Okay, so basically, if Ramin's got me grabbed here, okay, crossing talon has me stepping and pulling the elbow in, coming up to this position. I'll turn, and in the A version, we turn and either strike here or we'll step and strike with an elbow across the joint, take the guy down and do the 2 elbows, okay? Later on in the same belt, he throws a right punch, okay? And I step and I block here. Now, look at this position, okay? Grab my wrist. There we are, okay? Make a fist. Punch, sorry. Punch, good. Same position, right? Now, instead of grabbing and stepping across and hitting with the elbow and arm hook, we're just going to simply turn, palm heel strike, and then we'll step back, do a pull here, and finish off with a back fist, okay? So, let's do that a couple times. You just guys follow my lead here. We're going to step forward, left leg, little bit of a lean out. We're going to do what's called an apple pick block. And here's what's important, okay? On the apple pick block, there's no thumb. Okay, if you reach up and you pick an apple out of a tree, your hand is in this position, right? So when we step up, we're just going to come to this position, okay? Hook over the top of the wrist. We're not going to grab with the thumb again. We're just going to hook it. You're going to turn, palm heel strike, okay? Then we're going to slide under the person's wrist as we step back, pull them into a back fist. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay? So go ahead and do that with your partner a couple of times, and then we'll break it out into some full time stuff.
1, 2.
Your block on this one does not redirect your opponent's punch. You're moving out of the way.
3.
You're doing this. Okay, and moving you out of the way. So.
2.
The tradition I learned it just a little different, but that's the technique.
2. 3, 4. You gotta make it smoother.
One of the things you have to check. So when I come in here and so when you're hopping, so instead of having to lean back up, when I hit, I just slide down. That's the way I learned it.
2.
That's slide right down my wrist, you step back on your left. Boom.
Okay, let's break this one down a little bit and add some stuff to it. Okay? Is everybody familiar enough with that first movement? Step out, block, turn, do a palm heel strike. Okay, so, hold out your right punch again. Okay, so I step out, I'm doing this motion here, okay? Is that a war art or is that a joint strike?
Joint strike.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I break his arm?
Yes.
So is it a war art?
Yes.
I've incapacitated on the second movement. So overlap, right? Okay? If I want to make it a joint lock, okay? We can go almost to the wrist grab, but I can take that same procedure here, and I can just step and lock that, okay? Really not changed a whole lot about the technique. I've still used the same basic movement, okay? Okay, now, even from here, and this is why I like this technique, I can still, the end of the technique is you grab the wrist, step back, pull, and back fist. I can still, from this position, reverse this, pull back, and do some sort of strike here. So I'm not really changing anything, okay? So we can look at it that way. The other joint lock I like on this one, throw the right punch again, is you can step here, you can come across the arm and pull here, okay? Now, I'm really, in a sense, locking his neck, but I'm also pulling the elbow here against my body, okay? It's not going to end the fight, okay? But I can hold him here for a second, especially if I've got multiple opponents, and I can figure something else out to do. So it gives me a moment that I've got him just kind of stretched out. It'll take him a minute to process that.
That's actually an arm bar too.
Yeah, because I've got the arm bar here against the chest, but I've also got the lock here against the neck, okay? This arm bar here is not nearly as effective if I let go of his neck, because now it's hard for him to move into me if I've got that neck pushed back, okay? So, but again, I'm still on that same basic movement, all right? Now, let's move from the joint locking and striking to a push, okay? So I'm going to do this technique as a pushing technique. The difference is I'm going to make contact, then I'm going to apply the force, okay? This is where you're getting into non-lethal aspects of stuff. You've got someone, and the way my instructor told me originally with Kempo, he would say things like, in Kempo, if you want to escalate your force based on your opponent, you don't know what their intent is, you're in a situation that doesn't feel like it should be all that dangerous, so you don't want to just stomp somebody's teeth into the floor, okay? So he's dealing with someone throws a right punch, you step off and block and knock them away from you. They throw a punch again, you do something like a crashing elbow, okay? They get up off their knee, they throw another punch, and you dance to death and you end it, okay? But you gave them a couple of chances, all right? So if I'm going to go with push-pull, we're really getting into the aspect of, yeah, you threw a punch or you did something and I just kind of knocked you away. So all I'm going to do here is when you throw the punch, I'm just going to step and basically just use the motion and push, okay? Now, whether it pushes me or him, I'm just creating distance. Doing nothing lethal. I'm not really causing any pain. Going to do your punch again. I'm not necessarily targeting the joint. I'm targeting up on this part of the arm because all I'm really wanting is to take this motion and get him over that way, and then I can back off and give him some verbal commands or whatever I need to do, okay? So play with that as a push, and then in this same technique, we've also got the pull, which we can't do this, but go ahead and throw your punch again. I can go into this position here, maybe just tap the arm. I can step back and do a pull here, pull him into the back fist or whatever, okay? So play with the push for a second, and then we'll move on from that. Question? Yes.
Yeah. So some of the stuff that we were doing yesterday with the joint locks, you know, whether it be this control, right? Would that be, since it's just control, we're not killing anybody, we're not doing anything, would that be in the category of the latter? Of the non-lethal? Yeah. Because we're controlling.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's, you know, breaking someone's arm is not lethal, right?
Well, we're not doing that. We're just trapping and moving with it, controlling the movement.
Yeah, and I mean, you can lock someone's joint up, and then you can go ahead and apply the pressure and snap it, or you can stop there, yeah. And you've also got, kind of going with that, what's the difference between a joint lock and a push-pull? They're kind of going to overlap there as well. So go ahead and work on the push aspect of that one. You're kind of getting your opponent away from you.
Look at here.
Now, if it wants to get lethal right here, then, you know, chuck or sweep, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, even outside of the trade station. Well, I'm not standing right like this, right behind it. I can't, raise the other side. None of this stuff is without this. The other thing they can do is rocking this out, be a true base, you know, but just that's first that, you know, versus try to go which is you're needing your force is needing couple of hundred pounds, granted, you may be more
Okay,
I'm needing you.
using the motion that you guys are normally using, just sticking with the block and the motion of the left hand here that we're pushing with, can you make that a pull?
Yes. So it is at a minimum throwing you off balance.
What do y'all think about that?
Do not want to be.
Okay, so that's basically what I was talking about. We've already over this second. So same thing, if you're doing the right punch, I'm gonna step off. I can just do a push here and move myself away, or and you go the other direction. Okay, what I can actually do is I can stay with where he's going and pull him in. Okay, so I'm already twisting my body this direction. You're already moving that way, and so I can take that same motion that we push, and I can bring it in and make it a pull. Okay, so play with that a little bit. Okay. You know what? Yes, exactly. I talk about this law enforcement and always sitting down now, and they know what to
This is not legal. There's no way that I can raise a leg and kick him from that. It just isn't. If I'm pulling down.
You know what they say, if you can't keep all four on the road, you run to the sky and rev the engine.
That's a real, it'd be a timing issue. And they gotta know they're doing it. Like, you gotta challenge somebody, they go work at it and then come back.
They gotta be an educated bull. As you're doing the pull, he's coming in with this. He's gotta know you're gonna do the pull. And you're gonna be ready because you're gonna be in.
Like, frame, we know, because it's handshake, it's, yeah. So we know, right.
But you know.
But it's punch, but if I'm punching,
No, because he's
Again?
big man that scored down as well.
sitting down. Yeah, he's on an angle. It's not me.
I don't know, he tripped.
Until.
He bounced.
Yeah.
So I should have started with this, Cindy, because you guys were making up a whole lot more stuff. What I've seen already, and this is part of it, is you're getting to a certain point and going, ooh, I could add this strike to it, or I can add this knee or this kick or whatever, okay? Now, granted, in our parameters, that's not joint striking, locking, pushing, pulling. But you see what's already happening? You're already taking techniques that we know and going, if I apply it this way in the beginning, I can add this to it, okay? We look at things like in the Tracy's curriculum, slicing hooks, is that the name? First degree black belt, we have a technique, Rubin, you're gonna throw the right punch. I'm gonna take the same arm hook movement here, but I'm gonna go across the arm after I strike. I'm coming back in, pulling him down, and then doing a strike here, okay? But I could just step back and make that a lock.
Yeah.
And so we've got now the same thing we're doing, just throw your right punch again, okay? I'm still starting with the same basic motion, but I'm gonna sort of glance off this and go into a wrap here, and I've got something completely different, okay? And so these techniques are in a sense, they all work together within these different concepts. But in our curriculum, again, we're doing basically the same movement against a cross-hand wrist grab, okay? We're stepping, grabbing here, and then striking the elbow. If he throws a right punch, we're stepping, grabbing here, striking the elbow, give it with an overhead club, which we're going to stop it here, okay? Then I'm going to grab here, chamber this, and then strike, okay? If I want to make that just a joint lock, in our system, the C version of it, it doesn't matter, is we just simply roll the hand. I never lose contact and make it the lock, okay? But on those three that I did, what's the difference there? It's my timing, it's when I apply the force. And one of the important aspects of this is, instead of thinking of these as a wrist grab, a punch, or an overhead club, okay, I'm just simply manipulating the outside of his right arm, okay? So what if he grabs my left wrist with his right hand? Well, I need to do a movement where I'm trapping with this hand, striking with this. Why can't I bring this up, catch it here, and go right back into the same movement, okay? Grabbing with two hands, okay? I want to be outside this arm, right? So why can't I come up here, move off, and do something here, exactly the same, without changing anything about what I'm doing? If I'm on the outside of the arm, it doesn't matter if there are two arms involved, okay? Talked a little bit in, I think it was your seminar yesterday, about how if someone's pushing with one arm, they're going to be a little bit different in terms of symmetry versus being straight on, okay? But for the most part, if I'm moving to the outside of the arm, it doesn't really matter what the arm is doing, okay? When you do an overhead club attack, okay, if I do this block, what's the difference here if he has a knife instead of a club? Nothing, because I blocked his arm. I don't care what's in it, okay? Now, I'm going to change maybe the lethality of what I'm doing because he's trying to kill me versus hit me with a stick, okay? But for the most part, there's no difference, okay? But when we practice, when you see the stick coming at you or the knife, everything changes, and I'll have my students like drop the thing, just do it to the arm until you get used to it, and then I'll have them hold the arm up and say, put a knife in that. There's no difference, and their mind changes a little bit, okay? So if we can get to the outside of the arm versus the inside, then it's a different movement, okay? So any questions on the concepts? Does it make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
If there are no questions, I guess it does. Either that or it makes no sense at all. You don't even know where to start with questions. It's one or the other. But again, I mean, we can take just about any technique. So we started with aiming the spear yesterday. So if he grabs me, I'm sorry, so left shoulder grab, the way I learned it. So we step up and we did the strike here, break the arm off, and then strike back in, okay? Just go with something like that. When I start the movement here, I'm striking the elbow. That's a joint strike, okay? If I want to make this a joint lock, I could simply come up and maybe come in as long as he's going to hold on. Yeah, it's not a ending of the fight, but I can lock him up and kind of get his spine in a twist for a second, okay? That is a strike. That's a joint strike. That could be a joint lock if I do it slowly, okay, in terms of our parameters. And so the only one that really doesn't work there is going to be the half fist. Hard to lock the throat.
Anything with a half fist, yeah.
But can I come across the back and get a hold of the head and pull him into maybe something else?
Yeah.
Yes, no. I mean, that's part of the learning process. There are parts of the technique that don't really apply well to the concept. There are some techniques where the whole thing can be done that way. And that's, again, part of the learning process, and it shouldn't really matter what the technique actually is. Okay? Now, the last part of this is the evasion tactics. One of the things that Mtmas23 talked about was there should be a way to maneuver yourself when someone attacks you so there's no body contact whatsoever. Okay? Ray Aquila, because he's somewhat crazy, and I'll tell him that, he'll get me, but he took that concept very seriously, and so he went out and rented a rider moving truck and got 3 guys, and they got in the truck, and he said, attack me. And their idea is he wanted them to hit him, and he was moving around trying to have them make no contact at all. He went back to Mtmas23 and said, couldn't do it. And Mtmas23's like, well, yeah, but you did it for a little bit, right? And he's like, well, yeah, once or twice. And he said, that's the point. He said, you're not going to be in a crowd of people like this, and you guys all attack me at once, and I'm going to suddenly be over there by that door, and none of you all touched me. It's not going to happen. But you can avoid the first couple of people or the first couple of strikes. And so that was kind of what he talked about that. With the evasion tactics, if you guys want to, we've got about, 10 minutes, 5 minutes? I can show them to you real quick. We can run through them real quick. It's footwork, okay? They seem weird, but then if you do them for like 100 days, you'll be amazed at your agility and everything. So let's do this. Just make a straight line across the back here. And when I show you these, don't worry about trying to remember them in order. Okay? They're simple. Okay? We're not going to spend, we don't have time. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them. They seem just, I'll explain it, but if you do them over and over and over, the amount of agility, the spring that you get in your calves, because they're all jumping techniques. Okay? So all we're going to do is let's go ahead and take the hands. You can put them in like a bow or a prayer, or you can just hold them up, whatever. We just need something, where do I put my arms? Just up here somewhere. Okay? Feet basically a little bit less than shoulder width. All you're going to do is jump forward and back, and then back and forward. It's not a big jump. Yeah, just up, back up is what I call that. Okay, so just you only got to do it once or twice. Okay, we're not gonna work out with this one because Stephen needs people to be able to stand up during his. So we've done. Okay, now from here, drop to a left side forward fighting stance, and you're simply gonna with both feet at the same time. So we're not doing this. We're both feet. Switch sides, both feet. Okay? Step back up. Sides. So we're going to go side, back to center, side, back to center. Okay? That's the third one. Fourth one is zigzag. So we're going to go, okay? Go back to that center one. Okay? So up, back up is number one. Fighting stance, number 2. Side, number 3. Zigzag, number 4. Number 5 is box. Okay? We've got squares. We're not jumping that far, but we're going to jump corner. Just go around the box. Doesn't matter which way you go because we covered all the directions. Okay? If I start left here and go up, I'm going right here. So I can start to the right, go back, and go left. It doesn't matter, we're hitting both sides. So we don't need to do both sides of the box, right? So that's number 5. 6 is triangle. I'm sorry. 6 is half box, okay, which is also a triangle. Jump forward, side, and then diagonally back to your starting position, okay? So half box or right triangle, okay? Number 7 is a triangle. We're going to jump forward diagonally, back diagonally, and then across to your original position. That's all 7 of those. Now, let's just real quick, okay? We're going to do just one of these, okay? But everybody get your hands up. Do your up, back up, and stop. Left side forward fighting stance. Up and back. Right side forward fighting stance. Up and back. Feet together. Zigzag. Right, center, left, center. Yeah, so just right, center, left, center. Okay. Now, box. Half box. Triangle. That's it. Okay. Now, imagine do that 100 times a day for 100 days. No. Ray Quilla, he's a prison guard in Folsom Prison where Tosi is incarcerated. But Tosi shows him these tactics. He comes back after like a week and says, do these little jumps, they kind of wear me out doing 100 of them. And Tosi said, I told you 100 days. Don't come back and talk to me again if you're doing it for 100 days. And then in the seminar, Ray goes on and starts talking about other stuff. He said, yeah. And I said, what was the answer to the question at the end of the 100 days? He goes, I didn't have the question anymore. His students told me later that his calves got so springy that he would be in a fighting position when they were sparring, and they would make a lunge, and he would kind of twitch his toes and be 3 feet behind them. Just his ability to get up on his toes and just move very quickly was incredible. And so I did it for a while. I don't think I ever did a full 100 days. But, I mean, yeah. But, I mean, you do, because your first day, right? The second day, you're like, I can't do any of these. And so it does take a while. But the agility, the ability to move and spring and get into position and stuff, and notice we're not jumping hard. I mean, we're not going up, back. It's all on your toes. It's very quick, okay? you might be able to get the same thing out of jump rope, except that with jump rope, you're not putting the pressure on the sides of the foot and the angles and stuff like that. So that's the basic pattern, okay? This is pretty easy to remember because when you look at, especially if you've got mats like this, you kind of play with that box and work it from there, okay? So we can take a war art self-defense technique. We can apply joint locks and strikes, okay? We can apply pushing and pulling concepts to it. Notice with the evasion tactics, we don't have any techniques to apply those to, okay? Because what happens is you get agile enough that it becomes someone throws a punch, and if I need to move out of the way, if I don't want to get touched at all, then that little spring, well, if you're 4 feet away from your opponent after that first punch, you're on your way to getting out of there, okay? You can re-engage or not. That's kind of the point. All right. So any questions?